one post on Twitter got a lot of the escort world turning. You made a video. I think you also posted this on TikTok about when a guy asks for like an additional service or wants to extend, and you gave, a way for the escort to get her money at the end of the session. And a lot of girls were in the comments very upset, saying that you were leading the newbies astray. And that's a very surefire way of getting stiffed, getting shorted and not getting their money, is if they wait till the end of the session to collect. Do you want to clarify? That was a very polarizing post.
Yeah, well, social media is a polarizing place to be in general, really, isn't it? So if you step into that world, you accept that's what you're stepping into. Yeah, I'm very happy to clarify. So I wrote that post literally, as a lot of my content is written, off the back of a conversation with a private escort. For the last 13 years, that's what I've been doing primarily, private escorting, working with private escorts. And so the context of which I wrote that was specific to this scenario. My mentee said to me, hey, sometimes clients add a service during the session, mid coitus, when they've previously said that they didn't want to do it. I really want to not make the situation awkward. Like, how do I keep the booking smooth, but still ensure that everything goes according to plan? Like, that was the question. I've dealt with that many times, like particularly working in a brothel, right? At the start of your session, client gets presented with the options, sexually typically, and the fee associated with that, and they make a clear choice. You collect the fee that they've agreed to, and then you're in the booking, Vivian, like having sex, and they decide that they want to do a service they previously said no to, that they already know the price of. Now, you've already collected the full fee, presumably trust this person enough to still be continuing by having sex with them. They're in the heat of the moment. You want to get the fee, but because they're in the heat of the moment, literally probably inside you, to say to them, oh, sure, that's an extra $100. Just get up, go get that $100, give it to me, and then we'll keep going. In my experience, doesn't serve the purpose of you getting the extra fee, of providing the experience that you want to provide. And so when I've been in that situation, I would say exactly what I said to my mentee, which is I would respond excitedly because that's what they want to hear. Make reference to the business side to confirm we're adding a service here and that you understand that because we already spoke about it. And then I would continue on. And then at the end, they would give me the money. And in all the years that I did that, I never had an issue with it. And certainly no one that I know who is treated like that has had an issue. And it's been the most successful way to get the extra fee. But there was certainly, Vivian, context missing in that video, which was a learning to me at the moment where getting so much more exposure than ever before to a broader range of escorts, whereas previously, I think, really I've been mostly dealing with private escorts who would have that level of context. Good learning just to know that sometimes I have to think of extra things around the experience that I would usually assume the listener would know because they're doing the job. So that was the context, and I could have provided more clarity for sure.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And then, we're dealing with two different things. So when you're working in a brothel, that's a completely different thing versus private. But even then, you also mentioned the trust between the client and the escort. So with the brothel situation, I feel like the guy is not just going to walk out of there without paying, because that's a business. It's the private side that girls might be a little concerned that the guy will, try to abscond with their money. I just feel like, yes, in the context that you just said now, if he already knows that there is an extra fee for whatever the hell he's asking for extra, that's already there. He knows this. You guys have talked about this. He just chose to not do it before, and then he decided he wanted to do it. There's trust there. If there is no trust, please don't do this with somebody that you feel sketchy about. Like, you have to feel in your gut, this guy is good for it. If not, get your money up front. So I feel like that definitely clarified a lot of things. But yeah, trust. And you guys already discussed it in advance where he knows that there's an extra fee. She's not saying just trust any Joe Blow off the street to pay you after the service is done. Make sure you guys have built that rapport. So that way your session goes smoothly. I have regulars and stuff like that. But although at this point in my career, usually everything is discussed in advance. And if anything, for whatever reason, comes up, I don't have any doubt that I'm going to get my due. So I'm glad you did clarify that because a lot of girls were up in arms.
And look, rightly so. If you hadn't heard that context or been speaking of it specifically, then I can understand why people would jump to that. And so it's good that they commented on somebody. If somebody was reading it without that understanding, they would have seen the comments and thought about it differently. I'd also add to it two things. We need to make a fully informed decision based on the situation at the time. And in any job, particularly our job, every encounter is different. So you have to decide what you're most comfortable with in the moment. And that's not always clear. And secondly, the suggestion that I've made does carry a level of risk in that, yes, they may not pay. However, in my experience, it's a higher risk that they're not going to pay at all if I try and stop the session and get them to go up and get money. So in the moment, I have to make the decision based on the context that I have. Do I want to take the risk they may not pay at the end? Or do I take the risk that if I say, yes, but you have to go get money, that they say, oh, don't worry about it because like they're in the middle of us having sex and I don't want to get that. So I have to make that call. You know, I've met escorts who take bigger risks than that based on their opinion at the time. And it's a risk that I wouldn't take. Like I had a mentee who would extend bookings and not quote fees at all. And then at the end, she would figure out the quote of the extension. And I was kind of like, that isn't how I would handle it, but she was happy to do that. So it's not for me to tell her what is and isn't okay. But of course, I bet there are times where she had some uncomfortable conversations. So we just have to use our best judgment. And also too, we've had this particular mentee of mine who asked the question was an Australian mentee. She was a private escort and she sent her full service list in advance with the fees. And so she had the benefit of providing clarity around what each service costs, whereas an American may not have had that depth of conversation. And so a different path might be appropriate.
Exactly.
Be sure to follow the show on Twitter at T.S.E.G Podcast and on Instagram at T.S.E.G.P. Join our Patreon page for exclusive videos on dating, sugaring, and freestyling tips for both the gentlemen and ladies. Patreon.com/TSEGP. Follow your host Vivian on Twitter and Instagram at ExoticVivian. Please leave the show a 5-star rating on iTunes. Until next time, keep it sexy and stay receptive.